is Untapped with ME, and I am ME. And on this podcast, I love to do my two favorite things, which is one, tell true and crazy stories about me and my life in this little town, Nacogdoches, Texas, and drink beer. Yes, I do like to drink some beer. We're going to try a little bit right here. I am tonight drinking a beer that I brought home for my trip this weekend. This is called Double Muse Juice. And I got it at a brewery called Odd Muse in Farmers Branch. That's right outside of Frisco, Dallas, Texas, right? People who drink beer really enjoy going to breweries. Now, we got one right here, so you got to go to Fredonia Brewery, of course. But when you're in another town, it's fun to go to their brewery and see what they're doing. You can get a little flight. A flight might have 5 different kinds of beer that they brew and little glasses like these. I bought one. Isn't that cute? And so, yeah, that's what I'm drinking tonight. And so get you some. Go to breweries. Hello, Jerry. I'm back home now with Jerry Poole. Jerry, are you drinking a Dr. Pepper?
Actually, I'm drinking water. Just I played golf today. I'm dehydrated, so I'm drinking a lot of water.
I'm very proud of you for that. It's very important to drink a lot of water. I should drink more water.
I drink a lot of water.
Jerry Poole, you are a longtime court reporter, and tonight we are going to talk about this story that I've been covering. You haven't heard my episodes yet because I haven't posted them, but this story is called The Bear Blew Him Away. And it is the story of Kenneth Julian Palafox, part of our series called Murder and Crime in Nacogdoches, Texas. But this is our special edition we want to do whenever we can, because Jerry Poole was there, y'all. Jerry, are you ready for a few questions?
Sure. Let's go.
We had so much fun before we got started. We were really getting after it. We were like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if Dad were here?
Yeah,
and
it would be.
Judge Pierce, and he could tell these stories, except I was laughing like, yeah, I'd ask him one question. It'd be a 15-minute answer.
Yeah, he would get a lesson on it.
You were gonna, yeah. But I know he'd be proud of us. We want to talk about it because it's history. And if we don't share what we know, you and me, then it's bye-bye. It's gone.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
Jerry, I want to start and talk a little bit about you as a court reporter, because I love that story about how you got the job.
Oh, yeah. That my wife and I had just married, and I was still going to school. And actually, the district clerk of Rusk, Texas, was my little league baseball coach. And my dad lived in Rusk, and he heard the district clerk, his name was Bill Parrott, and he called my dad because the job, Wesley Welburn was the court reporter. And
I remember.
He was resigning or quitting. So an opening was coming up, and Bill Parrott knew that I was going to school. So he called my daddy, and my daddy called me. And so I got busy, and anyway, I called and got an interview. So I drove up to Rusk from Houston. We lived in Harris County, and went in and interviewed your dad, and we had a long conversation. I don't know how long. It was probably a couple of hours, and then finally I left and went back home, and I felt good about it. And then Wesley called me again next week, and he said, he wants you to come back up for another interview. Well, I didn't think much about it, so I said, okay. So I drove back up there, and well, lo and behold, another week went by, and he wanted me to come up again. I think it was 3 times I went up there, and on the 4th time, Wesley called me and said he wants another interview. And I said, well, Wesley, he talks about the same thing over and over, and we don't, it's nothing different. I said, what's the problem? And so Wesley said, well, don't tell him I told you, but he's waiting to see if you're going to get a haircut. And I did. I had longer hair. Yeah. And I said, all he had to do was just tell me, So I went by and got a haircut, and sure enough, I walked in and he grinned from ear to ear, and that's how I got the job. So
Love this stuff. Love it. So you were like 19 years old.
yeah, let's see. I was 20,
You were 20.
20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I still remember the first time I met you. You know, I think you had to come to that. Did you interview at the house? Because Dad
No,
was
no, I never went to the house.
okay.
I actually just went to the courthouse in Rusk. That was
Oh,
his
okay.
time to. That was his time to be over there because we were working Rusk at that time 3 months and Nacogdoches 3 months. We're
Yeah.
driving back and forth.
We'll have to explain more later about how, you know,
Yeah,
y'all were traveling all the time. I want to do that sometime and
yeah,
really get into it because that's how y'all got so close.
yeah.
Really.
I can tell the cat story then.
Oh my gosh. Well, go ahead and tell it. We're here. The cat story.
Oh
So first,
well,
go ahead. I
okay,
know this
all
story.
right,
We're going to do it. But now explain, though, why you were on the road so much.
okay.
You, the court reporter, and my dad, Jack Pierce,
Yeah,
the judge.
your dad. Well, the district that we had was a 2 county district. Originally, it was 3 county. It was Angelina, Cherokee, and Nacogdoches, and then it became a 2 county district. And J.W. Summers was the judge of the 2nd Judicial District, which originally was in Nacogdoches. And he would come over to Nacogdoches for 3 months, and then we would go to Rusk for 3 months. That's so they would have 2 different judges. We wouldn't have just one judge. And that, of course, later changed, but we were going back and forth every day. And he would come by and pick me up, and we'd go by the post office, where it was down on Main Street, and drive all the way to Rusk, and then have court and come back. We'd go Highway 21 on the way, and we'd come back 204 on the way home. But one particular day, we were headed to Rusk after we got the mail, and it was a rainy, kind of wet day. And after we got around the Angelina River, we started hearing sirens. And we could
Sirens?
siren, like a police car siren. We couldn't figure out what it was. Okay. And so we drove all the way to the courthouse, went through the Linwood cutoff, and when we got there, we kept hearing it, and then when we stopped, it quit. We couldn't figure out what it was, so we went in and worked till lunch, and we decided to come out, go to lunch, and we usually went to Pine View Restaurant. So we got down in the car and we drove to Pine View Restaurant, and the siren started again.
Oh no!
And we pulled in and parked. We got out of the car and walked towards the back, and this cat, Booger, I think his name was, Booger fell out. Huh?
It was Booger. Yeah.
Was it Booger? Yeah.
That was the name of the cat.
Yeah. He fell off he was apparently on the rear end of the car, and he fell out or jumped out, and he was just frantic. And your dad tried to reach under there and pick him up, and he was just wild, trying to scratch your dad. And so we finally called the veterinarian up the street, Dr. Martin, and he came down and had some long gloves. He got him and took him to the vet's office,
and he never came home. Okay, I'll just tell you the end. Booger never came home.
The vet called your daddy that afternoon and told him that cat was fine, but he was going to lose the back leg.
Oh.
And your daddy said, my kids would never understand why we had a 3-legged cat.
That was a time before people, now people buy these little wheels you put on your cat, right? Or your dog if they're missing a limb, but oh gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, Booger is he left the world in Rusk.
Oh God. Booger was no more. I don't think we heard that full story as children, but yeah, you told me that. So
I don't think your daddy, I think he swore me to secrecy, not to tell you all about it.
Yeah. But again, it's just for people who are listening to understand that you and Dad had a very different kind of relationship, and that you spent so many hours on the road. And that's part of why I love talking to you. I mean, you aren't just Jerry Poole, the court reporter. Of course, you were all, really almost like a son to him. So they only had 2 girls.
Your dad was a different. He had a different persona in the car. And when we were alone together, then when he was on the bench, I mean, everybody's always talked about how he was so strict and, proper in the courtroom. But when we were just alone, he let his hair down and we had a lot of fun together. He was a funny guy and had a lot of talks and a lot of laughs and just a lot of fun times.
That means a lot to me, as you can imagine, although it's very funny when you said he let his hair down, because of course he had none.
He had no hair, but
but I think that's right. He did have a certain persona on the bench, and then there was, because it was a role, and he felt very, I mean, he wasn't trying to look strict and tough. It's just he felt like we needed to respect the law and there needed to be decorum. But yes, why
he always said that if you lost decorum in a courtroom, people would lose their faith in the justice system. And that's so true, because I've been in courtrooms since that it's just helter skelter. And it's really, I think people get a bad light from that instead of how serious it is. And especially when the parties are there, it's very serious to them because they're having their rights decided in a court.
Yeah. Well, that's well said, and a good segue to a very serious case here in Nacogdoches. When we were last having our interview for the Cat Ate Her Face, the story of Edward Otho Higgins, you said, "Oh, you're going to do the Palafox story, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that will be next." Because just historically and legally, there's some things about that we want to share that are important for Nacogdoches County. So let's see. I'm thinking, Jerry, did you have someplace that you wanted to start with this? I have a number of questions for you.
Well, go ahead and ask some questions.
Okay, all right, then we'll do it that way. All right.
Yeah.
So because I've already done, my research and interviews, I had some things I wanted to know. Like, for example, Kenneth Julian Palafox in the courtroom, first trial, how would you describe his demeanor?
I don't remember a lot about that. I do remember that he was, I know he assisted his attorney, Tom Semp was his attorney, and David Adams was the district attorney at that time, and he was co-chaired by the Honorable Brian Holt Davis, county attorney. And I don't remember him being anything different than an ordinary person in a trial. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just a normal, if you say normal, but it was a very serious,
everyday normal capital punishment trial.
Yeah, well, it was not just punishment; it was a guilt, innocence, and then punishment. So,
tell me what you meant by what you just said.
Well, for the first thing you got to do is you have a trial of guilt or innocence, whether he was guilty or not guilty, and then if he's guilty, then you go into the trial of punishment. Mm-hmm. And of course, that case, it was indicted as a capital case because the deceased name was Paul Box, and it was his Kenneth Palafox's ex-father-in-law, and he. For capital punishment, you must be, while in the commission of a felony offense, you commit the offense of murder. And so while in the commission of an offense means basically while you're burglarizing or arson, rape, theft, any other felony offense, you're committing that offense, you kill someone. And in this case, they went there for the purpose actually of killing Mr. Boggs. And there was two defendants. The other one was Michael Dean Melendez. And later on, they got a confession from Kenneth Julian Palafox. And in the confession, he said that they killed him. And he described how it happened, but he said they stole some things to make it look like somebody else did it, and they didn't do it. They didn't go there, in other words, to commit a felony, and that was in the confession. And so they ended up basically introducing the confession. The state did. So that's kind of how that came about.
Jerry, just to back up then, because again,
Okay.
you know, government 101. So
All right.
the grand jury is going to indict. And
Right.
they had indicted him for capital punishment. But at that point, Jerry, were you and Dad not thinking, hey, this is probably not going to fly because of what you just said? I mean, if you look at the confession.
No,
No,
of course, your dad didn't have anything to do with the grand jury. That's
right.
the
You
grand
can't control
jury is,
that.
well, he doesn't have anything to do with it other than impaneling the grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
The district attorney brings a case to the grand jury, and at the time, uh, uh, based upon the confession, the indictment was basically that Kenneth Julian Palafox, that in Nacogdoches County on a certain date, while in the commission of the offense of burglary, committed the offense of murder by shooting him with a deadly weapon, the deceased. So, and when it came to trial, they introduced that confession, which basically helped prove that, along with the other facts of the case, the gun, which is another issue, with the deadly weapon. They had to prove a deadly weapon. And so, and when the jury found him guilty of that, he was assessed the death penalty. And then it went up on appeal. And I don't think anybody, the DA and your dad or anybody, realized that the state was going to be bound by that confession to the extent that it was basically, I would say, almost exculpatory to the offense.
Exculpatory. That is the word that was used in. You know, I read the. What do you call it when they write their review? I forget.
The opinion. The opinion. About the Court of
That was
Appeals,
exactly what they said, that it was on the state to see that the confession was actually indicating that it wasn't capital punishment. Didn't mean he didn't commit murder. It just was a non-capital punishment.
It was non-capital murder, so it was basically a murder, and and so they sent it back for a new trial, and then the state, when they offered it, they excluded that portion of the confession, which they could do. They could offer a confession and only offer certain portions of it. And they only offered that portion about the murder, and he was tried only for murder the second time, not capital murder. And that's when he got a life sentence second time, because it was not a capital offense, because he wasn't, while in the commission of the burglary, committed a felony. I'm not committed to murder. There was a cover-up, basically. And so it's not, they don't go there for the purpose and intent of committing burglary. So, and later on, the Court of Criminal Appeals has reversed that decision. And not that case, but they have reversed their decision on the state being bound. They're not necessarily now bound by everything in the confessions.
Okay.
If they offer it.
All right. So that's interesting, again, just to see how one thing sort of leads to another. But cases like this, where those confessions were became complicated for the state who had admitted them, that now it might be a little bit different. But at that time, so when they brought him back for the retrial, they had really decided not to have a trial. It really wasn't a trial at all, was it? Because he just came back to basically finalize the sentencing, right? Because David Adams, it was Herbert Hancock then, didn't want a real trial. Like, let's don't do the trial. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, I'm thinking that we had a trial, but maybe we didn't. I don't remember a second trial. It may have come back just for punishment, and then they basically gave him a life sentence, and then he went to penitentiary for life. But after the first trial, the second trial is not so memorable.
Right. It sounded more perfunctory, like, this has happened. We need to do this, and right.
And that was in 78, and I became the court reporter for that district court in June of 72. So I hadn't been there but 6 years, and of course we had done a lot of stuff, but I hadn't reported any case of that magnitude that I can remember up that point. So it was, to me, it was a pretty major thing, major case.
Is that a lot of pressure for you? I mean, I know now you have a lot of really great equipment, and the way that court reporters operate is so different, so modernized. But I'm just wondering, because back then, I don't remember exactly how you were doing it, but I can remember I'd come into the courtroom and you'd be just typing away, and you'd see me and kind of give me a look like you could just do it all. And I was just amazed, because that transcript is so important.
Yeah. Well, it's the same method that I did in 72 and 78 that I did when I retired in 13. I just began to have a newer machine that was had software and computer programs that was able to transcribe all that for me. So it came a long ways. I was
yeah, a long way. Right.
And then it was all computerized.
I remember there was something about the murder weapon. Like at first, after the confession, it wasn't quite found. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I think it was before the confession, maybe.
Oh, okay.
MC Roebuck and Sheriff John Lightfoot.
Legends.
Legends, both of them. And it was during John Lightfoot's as sheriff of Nacogdoches County. The case was a county case. It wasn't a city case, because it occurred outside the city limits. And I remember, I believe C.B. Copeland was one of the deputies, and maybe Bud Kane, and another one or two that I can't remember. But the weapon was turned over to a local attorney named Roddy Willis by a girlfriend at that time, I believe, of Kenneth Palafox's. And Roddy had the weapon in his office. And during the sheriff interview, his deputy's interview, and the MC Roebuck went to his office, and they went in and basically had to tell him to give the weapon to them, because he was holding evidence, and had to basically threaten him to get the weapon with a crime being committed. And of course, he turned it over finally, and of course, he didn't get charged with an offense, but he did turn it over to them. And that weapon was later determined to be the weapon used in the commission of the offense.
I wonder why he held on to it for so long, when he knew what that could mean.
Well, it wasn't that long he had it. I mean, the case was solved probably within a week after it was committed. So it wasn't really that long he had it. And I don't know how long it was before she took it to his office, what the time period was. But needless to say, he should have called the sheriff's department and reported that he had the weapon, but he didn't.
Needless to say, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jerry, our time is almost up. Is there any certain one thing that you wanted to make sure that was said regarding that case?
I'm just going to look real quickly at your notes and see whether there's something you might have asked me about.
Asked you about. Just any interesting. Oh, the bailiff and challenge.
The bailiff.
2 weeks sequestered.
Yeah, the jury was sequestered. The first one that I remember, and I think the last one that I remember, maybe. But the bailiff, I think, was Jack Corley. Jack was from Central Heights. He was a deputy sheriff, and Jack was a really good guy. And they actually got the Fredonia Hotel to block off a floor of the hotel where the jurors would stay, and Jack would stay on the end by the elevator, basically, and they couldn't leave. And it was kind of a unique thing to have a jury sequestered. They used to sequester them in the courthouse because there used to be beds back in the old grand jury room. In fact, when I started, they were still there. But I mean, we've had juries out late. We never did actually pull out the beds. I think bailiff used to pull one out and shake it a little bit to get a verdict come in. So I thought we were going to have to stay all night. But Jack was the bailiff, and there was one juror. There was a couple I know. One of them was named John Durfus, and John was owned a real estate company called Log Cabin Realty out on the south side of town. And John was known to drink a little whiskey. And anyway, John asked the bailiff one night or one afternoon if it was all right if his wife or some family member could bring him a fifth of whiskey. And so the bailiff called your dad, and I think I was in there when he called him. And your dad, he was trying to be proper and everything, but he kind of grinned at the same time and told Jack Coley that it would be okay for John to have something.
I love that story, especially if you know how pretty straight-laced Jack Pierce could be, but just understanding that was a very stressful situation.
Well, that was something that was not told for many years. It was not told.
I bet. That's what makes it great talking in 2023. You know, we can tell some things that we couldn't say before. But, I love talking to you. The next story that we're going to do is another murder, and it's going to be called Lost in the Night, and it will be the story of Donald Davis. So I know that's a story that we want to cover. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'll be ready for that interview? I
am. I remember that case well.
I actually came up there for that trial. I was probably like, 14 years old, but I would come up there. So I remember the you-know-what in the bag, the evidence. Yeah, I was there, but you were there more. You were the court reporter, and I want to hear all about it. So, Jerry, I was just going to say, I love this. So glad we're doing this. Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
It is, as always, and we will do it again soon. So as I say to everybody, say what, Jerry?
I said, let's do it again.
Oh, we will. So subscribe and follow to Untapped with ME.